So we're excited to have you on the show today. Our show, Best Version of Me. When we think about that, you're one who comes to our mind because it's best version of me is not just one part of your life, but it's a whole being, right? And I think you really portray that. So maybe we can kind of go back and talk about who you are and maybe what the hat means to you.
Yeah, first off, I love the podcast title. I think it's perfect. My mentor, Ed Milet, always talks about, becoming the best version of yourself, and so it's a great title. And the hat, I wear the hat. It's probably one of the hats I wear the most, because as you know, as you're going through life, building a business, just building a life in general, and you as an individual, everything doesn't always go perfect, and so it's important to remember that God's got your back, and if you do things right and you keep that relationship, that things work out.
Yeah. Absolutely. And even before we go into the podcast and our conversation, the name you mentioned, Best Version of Me. Mm-hmm. What does that mean to you when you hear Best Version of Me?
I think regardless of what your industry is or your background or what it is that you do, whether you work a job, whether you're just in school, you're building a company, you're an entrepreneur, in anything, I think life gets boring if you're not chasing something, and when one race ends, another one begins, and when you hit one goal, you start another one, and that's just kind of how I've always led my life. But I think regardless of how much success you might have or might not have, it's easy to get discouraged, and it's also easy to get content.
That's right.
Discouraged in the sense that maybe you're missing your goals and things aren't going as planned, and you're down in the dumps and broke, or content in the fact that you're not in a place where you need anymore, and I think when that chase ends, life just gets kind of boring, and chasing the best version of yourself is something you could fight for every day regardless.
Maybe you can kind of tell us about your journey to your faith, right?
Yeah.
Because I know as a pastor's kid, you were not born saved.
Right.
You had to, I'm sure, had some struggles or maybe some things that you saw, and what kind of led to your faith, and then from there we'll kind of go into where you're at today and go from there.
Yeah, my dad's been a pastor since 1991 at the same church in El Monte, and I was 2 years old when he took that position, and so prior to that he was pastoring a church in Santa Clarita, at Santa Clarita Baptist Church, and so I've never known anything other than church. Since before I even knew that's where I was at. I've got a younger brother and sister as well who grew up in church as well. So it's interesting because you don't realize what you have until you see the alternative, right?
Yeah.
And so, for example, I grew up in a home where I've never seen my parents argue. I've never seen my parents fight.
It's a blessing.
I've never even seen my parents get irritated with each other. So you grow up in seemingly a perfect family. But obviously we had our challenges. And my wife comes from the very opposite. So I've never, no one in my family's ever divorced. Not any of my cousins, not my aunts and uncles, my parents, my grandparents, nobody. And then my wife comes from a family where no one's ever not divorced.
Not divorced.
Not divorced, right?
Right, so they say opposites attract.
Opposites attract,
there
right?
You go.
So my faith has always been there. But when that's all you know and you don't know anything different, you don't understand the value of it or appreciate it. And so, when you start going through things, and things get tough, or you start to really discover you, or you start to see life outside of church, where you make friends, outside of church, and you see things that people go through, you realize that part of the reason life's always been seemingly easy is because you've never had to do life by yourself.
So you grew up in El Monte, you went to school in Rosemead, you went to a private school?
Right.
Was that a Christian private school?
Christian private school, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you were immersed into it.
That's it, man. That's all I knew.
Wow. And was that something that you had to come still to your own personal conversion?
So I've led worship in church since probably, I want to say 15 years old, maybe 15 or 16. So music and worship has been a big part of my growth in my relationship with Christ. But I've also studied a lot on my own in the sense that, I've come to appreciate a relationship with God rather than a religion.
Mm-hmm.
My wife grew up in a Catholic church, and so we both came from a faith background. Her grandma raised her, and and so her faith very, very strong, just from a different set of tradition, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, to this day, I mean, it's something that I hold very, very close to me, and I give it my relationship with Christ the credit for the things we've been able to do.
So how did you go from being a pastor's son there at private school, and then now having a desire, now even fulfilling the entrepreneurship, self-employed business owner?
Well, I will tell you, I was never a good student. And so I went to school to play sports. I didn't go to school to go to school. And so I don't know, I was always told that I should be a pastor as a kid, but I was always in trouble.
Is that because you were a pastor's son, or because they saw the gift of gap, or
probably the gift of being able to
influence
communicate and influence but I was always in trouble. So I'll give you a perfect example. I got kicked out of Muscatel.
Oh, you did?
I got kicked out of Muscatel, and so when I got kicked out, I got put in a private school.
Was the principal still there, the one that drove the Porsche?
Mr. Musgrove was the principal.
Yeah.
Drove the
Doctor.
Porsche. Yep.
Yeah.
My mom and dad said, well, because I was always in trouble through school, and so they said, well, let's just put him in a private school. So I went to a private school, small private school called Patriot in El Monte, and it was actually, long story short, it was the same school that I'd gone to in kindergarten, and but it was the high school, and that school ended up closing, and they were moving to Orange County, and so that was going to be my freshman year in high school. And my dad said, well, if we put him in a public school, he's going to get in trouble, so we're not going to put him in a public school. So my dad decided he was going to open a Christian school.
Wow.
At our church. And that was the first year.
And what church was this?
First Baptist Church in El Monte.
Okay.
So he opens a Christian school. And long story short, my wife's sister isn't doing well in a public school at that time, and she gets referred to the school. That's how I ended up meeting my wife.
Wow.
And so the funny thing is that had I not got expelled in 8th grade, my wife and I would have never met. School just wasn't my thing, and I loved entrepreneurship. I loved business, even though I didn't know what that was. In fact, my best friend, my sophomore year in high school, he was a year older than me. He dropped out of school, and he was at the private school, and he dropped out. And I remember talking to him, and I said, "Wait, you're gonna do what? You're gonna drop out?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur."
And what grade was this at?
8th grade. Yeah. Ninth. He was a junior in high school. And I'm like, a what? An entrepreneur? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to work for myself. I don't need to go to school. And I remember thinking, that's the craziest thing I've heard, but I'm all for it, And he went on to do music videos and had this big YouTube channel and started producing music. And then he shot music videos for MTV Music, all this stuff. And now he runs one of the top wedding cinematography companies in the world. So I left high school and decided, you know what, I'm not going to go do the 4, 5, 6 year thing in college. So I did actually for one semester go to school, and I went to a private school called the Masters College out in like Santa Clarita area. One semester put me $18,000 in debt.
The Masters College?
Masters College. It's actually a Christian college. It's a seminary where my dad went.
Wow.
They compete with APU and all them on the sports, in the same division, same league. And I went there for one semester, and I said, dude, I just cannot do this. Like, I'm freaking miserable. I hate it here. I'm getting way buried in debt, and I don't even know what I want to do. So I left there. I went to UCLA for medical school, got in an ambulance. And between 16 and 21 years old, I had 14 different jobs. So I interviewed really well, and then I got bored and I quit.
14 jobs?
14 jobs.
Wow.
Everything from parts driver at Pet Boys to Olive Garden to, you name it. I worked for 2 different ambulance companies, got hired with the fire department. And then I'm standing, my wife and I got married, I was 21. And
did you still have that space while you were doing these regular jobs of that conversation you had with that friend in high school?
So that's the funny thing is I remember we've been married about 6 to 7 months. She's in grad school at University of Laverne studying her master's, working full time. And the fire department had all these budget cuts. Jerry Brown had cut 700 jobs.
Yeah.
So I remember I'm standing in the doorway in our master bedroom, and frustrated because we're check to check, we're broke, I can't get hired anywhere.
How old were you?
I was 21, and we got in a little bit of an argument over nothing. It would always go back to money. You know how like when you're broke, it doesn't matter what happens, an argument always ends up back to money.
Yeah, one of the main causes of divorce.
Yeah, and I'm
Money.
standing there.
Yeah, money.
It was like over where we're gonna go eat or something.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just I don't know. You pick something. And money's like when you don't have any. You know, people say money's not everything, but no one who has money has ever said that. It's always people that don't have money.
Yeah.
You know, and a lack of money is that it just creates this pressure and this heat that's constantly on you. And I remember her going like, "Damn it, Jay. I wish you could just find a career and stay there."
Yeah.
You know, and I remember standing there in my head going, God, that's all I want. That's literally all I want.
How was that to your ego?
No, it killed me because she's paying all the bills.
Yeah.
You know, she's carrying all the weight. She's waking up every morning, driving to work. And I'm like at home, the freaking loser, trying to figure out what the heck I'm going to do. And it's not that I was unmotivated. It's that there was a different plan for me that I didn't see. And 2 days later, my dad calls me and says, "Hey, I want you to come to this office and I want you to see this presentation."
So your dad recruited you.
My dad.
God used him, right?
Yep.
Oh, man.
And my dad had gotten recruited into the industry by a girl who was in his youth group 15 years before that.
So you're retiring your dad.
So my dad overrides me, yeah.
Wow.
And I
huge
went-
organization he has.
What is this?
in the
Can you share?
financial industry, in finance. Yeah. So my dad recruited me, and now to this day, my dad overrides all of Tenacity, which pays about, at this point, it's probably $20,000 to $30,000 a month. You know,
Amen,
whether
man.
you get out of bed or not.
What a blessing.
Yeah.
And it just gets bigger. But that was the day that my entrepreneurship side started. I think a lot of people struggle because they don't know what their why is, especially if you don't come from this sad story where you grew up with nothing, you know, when you were on the street. You know, you hear like a story like Oprah's, which is so powerful because she was homeless to where she is now. I mean, some people don't start at the bottom. I didn't start at the bottom, but man, we were pretty broke. You know, we were struggling. My dad did not choose to become a pastor because he was going to be financially wealthy on earth, right?
And some people have that misconception because they're a pastor that they have all this money.
Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes. But, you know, it's funny. I could tell you that the reason I didn't become a pastor is because I don't want to be broke. And when I tell my dad that, my dad says, well, what does that mean? And you don't have to be broke. And I said, no, but you almost do, because if you're not, then you become a scandal because you're not broke. So like society wants you to be broke if you choose ministry full time. I would say if you're trying to figure out your why, or if you don't know what I mean by why your why is why do you get out of bed? Like why do you do what you do? What pushes you more than a paycheck? Once money's no longer an issue, once you don't need to make money anymore, now why do you keep going? You know, and for me, my biggest goal in the beginning was I want to get the money thing out of the way, because business isn't fun when you have to make money. You know, sitting with clients when you need them to say yes is not fun. So for me, the first thing was I got to get the money thing out of the way so I could do the things I really love. And for a long time, I didn't know what the why was. But what drove me, and I think what drives someone when you can't figure out your why, is competition. Like that entire time period where where all I could think about is I got to make money, I got to make money, I got to make money. The why was competition. You know, money was a way of keeping score, in the sense where I don't need the money. I haven't needed to make money for 7 or 8 years, but it's that becoming the best version of myself, right? It's that I got to do better than I did last month. I got to do better than I did last month. I got to do better. Money is a very weak motivator. People think money is a strong motivator, but if money was enough to drive someone, then everyone wouldn't be broke. You know, and I really got to appreciate the simple things, you know, being able to stay home, being able to just walk around the community and just read a book, you know, and not the constant driving, not driving in a metaphorical state, but literally like always in traffic, always going from an appointment to appointment, everything shifted online. Just so much changed, where in the beginning, you know, you grind because you want to be seen, you grind because you want to make it, you grind because you want to make it big, and you know, you want the recognition and the prestige and everything that comes with success. And then you get there and you realize, like, dude, now my grind is different. Now I'm grinding because I want to disappear, where no one knows who the heck I am, and life is paid for, and I never have to think about $1 again, and my family could have everything they want. You know, and so it's different, I think, but I do think there is a time and place for everything. You know, Ecclesiastes chapter 3 talks about that. There's a time for everything. Every single thing, good and bad, has its place. There's a time when you got to hustle and you have to get after it, because, you know, you don't have that window of opportunity forever. In a business sense and just life in general, everything's about having someone's attention. And if you could get on social media and you could figure out how to get good at it, you could get someone's attention. And so that's how I built all of Tenacity. And then what happened is people would always message me, or I'd go on Instagram Live and they'd say, hey man, can you help me with my Instagram? Hey, how do I grow my followers? Hey, how do I do this? And so I'd start responding to people. And then the problem is I have, to this day, I probably get 200 to 400 messages a day. And I've always made it a part of my brand that everyone knows I reply. You know, the problem is you can't reply to 400 messages a day. And so eventually what ended up happening was I was sending so much business to a friend of mine who owned a social media company. And finally, I think in a week and a half, I sent him like $30,000 worth of business.
Wow.
And so then finally I was like, you know what, I'm gonna figure out how to, I have a rule, which is if it takes my time, it takes my thought, or it takes my energy, then I'm not going to do it. And so when I started, I said, I'm going to figure out how to monetize this without it taking my time, energy, or thought. Right? So I put a couple of the right people in place, and before you knew it, man, we had some of the biggest artists and athletes and entertainers, because everyone wants the same thing. I don't care if you're a billionaire or you're broke. The human spirit was designed by God to be appreciated, and everyone wants the same thing. Everybody wants someone to pay attention to them, someone to validate them, and someone to make them feel good. And there's a lot of money to be made in that industry, you know, and so before you know it, it just kind of blew up. If you use more than 5 hashtags, then Instagram or TikTok suppresses your content. The reason is because a hashtag is there to help that social media platform file your content. Meaning that if I'm putting a picture of a Lamborghini and then I put hashtag Honda Civic, what ends up happening is that Instagram looks at this Lamborghini and they think it's a picture of a Honda Civic. So now they go put it in a Honda Civic file. So if I put 25 hashtags, then I'm confusing the platform. They're like, well, what? We still don't know what the heck this is. And so it goes nowhere. So you put 3 to 5 hashtags, that's it, of the top one. So for example, if I'm putting a clip of this podcast, I'm going to put hashtag self-development,
motivation,
hashtag motivation, hashtag, you know,
best version of me, you know, things like that. And then Instagram's going to look and go, okay, I know what this is. And they're going to put that in that file. And then they're going to show it to people that search for this type of stuff. People just do it all wrong. You know, they put 25 hashtags and before you know it, they don't know where to put your content. And so your content goes to no one. So everything you know now as the best version of yourself today, if you're able to go back and talk to your 16 or maybe even 18-year-old or even that 21-year-old who had that conversation with your other half, what would you tell that person?
So it's I'm at a place in my life now where I'm very, I would say at peace, because happy is not a destination. Happy is a culmination of other things, which is, feelings of joy and gratitude and peace of mind and fulfillment and purpose. And so I would say I'm at a spot where I'm at peace. The funny thing is I'll tell you a story. I was, in all the grind of building a business, there's highs, there's lows, there's everything in between. There's lawsuits, there's attorney fees, there's drama, there's people that come for your character and who you are as a person. And then there's a bunch of people that love you, right? Yeah. That got your back to the end of the world, doesn't matter what. And as an entrepreneur, you have this thing called entrepreneur paranoia, right? Which is that no matter how good things are, it's very hard for you to do anything else. So I'll give you an example. Like for me, there was this point where I went one night after appointments right here in Glendora, and we were playing volleyball. And it was freezing cold. And we were losing every damn game. And I hate losing. And when you lose, you have to sit outside. So not only you have to sit out and wait for the next game. So not only are we losing every game, we're sitting outside and it's freaking freezing. And it's like midnight. We played from 9 o'clock to 1 in the morning pretty regularly. And I'm sitting in the car because it was too cold to sit outside. And I felt like I was going broke. I felt like my whole business was falling apart. Everything was falling apart. And I knew consciously that wasn't true. But I was like, I'm here at this playing freaking volleyball. I'm getting my ass kicked every game. We're losing over and over again. And I could be working, and instead I'm wasting time doing this, and I haven't talked to my team, I haven't talked to my staff. I feel like everything's falling apart. And it was all fake. It was just in my head. Yeah. But it was that entrepreneur paranoia, which is very healthy because that's what keeps you moving, but it's also, it robs you from all your peace of mind, right?
Because if you were winning, you wouldn't have that self-conversation.
So it's the whole nothing's ever good enough, right? Which is what makes you rich, but it's also what makes you miserable. And so I'm sitting there that night and I said, okay, what makes me feel good? And I'm literally having this conversation with myself, sitting in the car. And I'm like, okay, writing accounts with clients, that makes me feel good. Collecting new agents, getting referrals, and I start writing down all the things that put me in a good place. And I'm like, okay. And that day, probably 4 years ago, I made something called winning the day, right, for me.
Did you win the day?
Which is in order for me to win the day, I've got to do at least 2 out of these 4 things every day. And if I do 2 out of these 4 things every day, I've won the day. And if I've won the day, then even when I start to feel like this, I could look back and go, okay, chill out, bro. Because as long as you're doing this every day, you're going to go up no matter what.
Any significance on the 2 out of 4 or not 1 out of 3 or 3 out of 5? Was there something that?
It was the 4 things that in my industry that move you forward and get you paid. Revenue generating activities, right?
Which so 50% of that.
If I did at least 2 of those things, I knew there was no way. Because when people go, I had a bad, this year sucked.
Yeah.
Really?
For you to have a bad year, the whole year, 52 weeks, if you had a bad year, that means you wasted 40 out of 52 weeks.
That's 365 choices.
Right. It's how did you have a bad year? Or I had a bad month. In order to have a bad month, you got to have 4 bad weeks in a row. How did you have a bad month? Or I had a bad week. So really, the whole week? 4, 5, 6 days out of 7 sucked, and so if you start to break it down, you realize even having a bad day is tough.
Yeah, 24 hours.
And so I run mini days, so I'm up at 6, and I run a day from 6 to 1, then a day from 1 to 6, and a day from 6 to 11, and so I break my day into 3 days, and I get done by 1 o'clock in the afternoon more than what most people get done in an entire week. And then I go on to day number 2. In fact, I have an alarm that goes off on my phone every day at 2 o'clock, and an alarm that goes off at 7 o'clock, and an alarm that goes off at 10 o'clock. just reminding me like, all right, bro, you're a third of the way through. Like, what have you done so far? So this thing called mini days, right? So mini days is where, for most people, they waste the whole day. They waste the whole day because they don't waste literally the whole day, but they waste like 17 hours of it, right? Which means by the end of the day, you have what like I call soccer mom syndrome, which is where you ask the mom like, hey, can we meet today at 4 o'clock? Oh, no, I can't because my kid has a soccer game at 1. And so like in their mind, the whole day's gone. Even though like they got there, they started at 11, they got there at 1, they're done at 3.
Yeah.
But in their mind, the whole day is shot. Okay. And so I break it down into 3 different days, 3 mini days. So it could be different for everybody, whether it's 6 o'clock in the morning till 1, and then 1 o'clock to 7, and then 7 o'clock to 11 or whatever. And so my goal is to win the day for me, whatever that is for you, by 1 o'clock. So I wake up, I go to the gym, right? Then we get out of the gym. And then when I leave the gym, like by 1 o'clock, I'm trying to get as much done as I can. And then maybe from 1 to 2, I eat lunch or whatever and chill. And then from 2 o'clock to 7, boom, I start my next day. What could I get done from 2 to 7? And I got a list of things I got to get done. And then I chill from 7 to 8. Then from like 8 to 11, I read, I do my gratitudes, I do things like that. The question of like, if you could go back, what would you tell yourself different? So everything I'm talking about now about winning the day and valuing my time, those are things that in the beginning you just wake up and you just run. Mm-hmm. That's it. Like with no direction, you're just, I gotta pay the bills, 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 I gotta pay the bills. And you don't value your time and your sanity. But there's a chapter in life when you have to be in that place. But I think the peace that I have now comes from putting things in place that give me, that peace of mind. And one of them is meditation and just mindfulness, not in a, sitting with your legs crossed way, which some people do that. I can't do that. I've tried. It's not something I'm good at yet, at least. But just mindfulness, which is like, at the end of the day, we take a shower to get rid of all the crap that our body collected throughout the day, but we don't take a shower to clear our mind before we go to sleep.
Yeah, mentally.
For me, it's just the simplicity of taking a walk around my community and just paying attention to the things that you take for granted, which is the simple things like the trees, finding a flower in the flower bed you never saw the time before, really winding your mind all the way down and thanking God for the fact that you have freedom and peace, and as bad as it is, it's probably worse for somebody else. Like time, man, time keeps going, and we all have this window of opportunity. Even from a money making standpoint, people used to say, "Well, Jay, why do you work so hard? Why do you work so hard? Why do you make?" Bro, you don't know how long you're going to be healthy.
Yeah.
You don't know how long, you just don't know. Like your ability and your window of time to be at your prime and to make that money and to build that financial security for your family, that not everyone gets that amount of time forever. You're one freaking drunk driver away from, maybe you're not dead, but you can't get up and grind like you did today. Things change.
Yeah.
And so for me, I that peace of mind at the end of the day of just kind of taking a shower mentally, just taking time to be grateful and then also to plan the next day. Those are things that I wish, working on yourself,
Yeah.
Sitting with a coach, going and seeing a freaking therapist. There are things that a lot of times becoming the best version of you is not you learning new things. It's you unlearning a lot of things that you developed and beliefs that you built, that you attracted, or that you learned from the people who raised you, who didn't know what the hell they were doing either. And we inherit a lot of shit that
that's
honestly
a lot of
we
things
don't get rid
sometimes
of.
too, and self-development, even in ministry, we learn new things, but we forget to unlearn the old things.
Yeah,
so now
right.
inside you have old things and new things that are at war with each other, and sometimes that's why we're having those mental battles. We have to unlearn so we make room for the new stuff.
Yeah,
right.
Because a lot of us, we were raised, not necessarily myself, but everybody, we were raised by people who were trying to survive too. You know, and we build on beliefs that we inherited that weren't necessarily healthy to begin with.
Yeah.
Which is why my philosophy is, and when I'm talking to people, especially parents, is don't be the type of parent that your child has to heal from. You know, and a lot of us, we do that subconsciously on accident.
We've had that conversation too. We're in our 40s. Time is different, right? We think of time and life differently because our time is maybe shorter, maybe now as 40, than we were back in our 1920s. So when we take on a business or a venture or a partnership or even a friendship or anything type of commitment, we have to really think it through and say, okay, I only have so much time left. Is this something that's really worth my time? Because if I'm doing this, it's taken away from maybe my wife time or my kids time or making money time, right? So is this really beneficial? Is this a win-win?
Yeah.
And if so, I'm all for it, right?
Yeah.
And if not, I got to say no at this moment so I can focus on what I do have on my plate.
Right.